Welcome to the Troy Kearns podcast, where we talk all things real estate, business, and entrepreneurship. Today I have a very special guest. I am with Elon Salzberg. She has been a major investor in Denver, in Kansas City. Super smart. You've got your Juris Law degree from Columbia University.
No, I JD from University of Denver, and then undergrad, I went to Columbia.
Undergrad, so those are, if anybody knows, those are pretty prestigious schools. It's a pretty prestigious degree. Super smart. In fact, a couple of the people that I ran into in Kansas City, Robert Mayer, a lot of other people, you're partners with them. And so when I first met Dawn, met through Andrea, who we're actually sitting in her lounge right now doing an interview. So thank you, Andrea. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Let's hear about your story. Where you're from, how'd you get into real estate investing, what are you doing right now, and why do you go by Dawn?
Well, let's start with by Dawn, because the other stuff's sort of boring.
Okay.
But I don't know about boring, but I mean, it's up to you. And I think the Dawn part's, visible.
It is visible, but if you're listening, let's talk about people who are listening.
Oh, people are listening. So people are listening. You hear somewhat of a male voice,
right?
Low voice. I present in a gender fluid way. So I'll present sometimes very masculine and sometimes very feminine. It's something that dates back from probably 5 years old or so.
Really?
On some level or another.
Okay.
But in any, very closeted until probably the past 6-7 years.
Right. Now you're all out.
Now I'm in it to win it.
Yeah, I think the first time I met you was at a Halloween party, or what party was that?
Christmas, I think.
Christmas
I
party.
think I talked to you before that, but Christmas.
We talked
a few times. I think I met you at Andrea's Christmas party.
That's right.
If I remember right. And I don't know that you've met him. I think you've talked to him, but I think you've only met
I've
her.
only met him.
Her.
I've only met her, and I've only talked to him.
Right. So right now, if you're listening, I'm presenting in long hair and a little kind of pink skirt, heels. Not that makes you one gender or the other, but I have a more feminine presentation. And then other times I bald as a ping pong ball and grow a pretty thick beard.
You grow a pretty thick beard. You got a pretty good...
Pretty burly beard. I mean, I have a 5 o'clock shadow right now that I cover up with makeup as best I can, but present in a more masculine way. And I think in terms of how I've addressed the world, that's always been part of me, is that I address the world in kind of both ways. And sometimes it's challenging because they're very different approaches to things.
Right.
And I think the masculine energy can bring a lot, and so can feminine energy.
Right.
I think, interestingly, in real estate, it's a generally fairly male-dominated field in certain areas.
Right. I would agree with that.
Certainly in the construction side, the development side, the decision-making side, it's a very male bank lending decision.
For sure.
Banker side. You see a lot more women in sales often, and often in more forward-facing roles.
Right.
And I think there's a loss to that, because the more voices at the table, the better the product is, the more collaboration.
Right. And so, how did this whole journey because me as a typical Anglo-Saxon white male growing up in a household, and this whole pronoun shift has been just happening in probably the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, if I was going to guess.
I think that's right.
You see, everybody's putting the pronoun on their signature, or this generation, I would say, is going that way.
Sure.
Why do you feel comfortable dressing as a woman versus a man?
I have no idea why I feel comfortable. I know that I need it. I know that it's my mental health. I think it's something that's been needed for a long time in different outlets.
Okay.
My formula is, I always say I have to be both if I want to be either.
Oh, that's crazy.
And it's hard, but it's just real, because if I'm one, then the other is missing, and if I'm the other, then the other is missing. And why in this moment? There's probably different historical trends to me. I think we go through different sort of gendered eras. I get into kind of hippie magic.
Okay.
A lot with stones and the rest, and they sort of say there's a rise of, I think, Aquarius or something. But I think there's a masculine energy that can build a lot of things. There's also a feminine energy that builds a lot of things. And I think we're in a place where we're in a transition, I think, between what energy is necessary from a communal standpoint.
Can you dive a little bit deeper down there?
Sure. This isn't on the real estate trend, but it can be to an extent.
No, I think we're going to go real estate.
Even on a real estate end, when you're developing, you're building, you're working on the construction sites.
Right.
You get that there's a bunch of alpha males.
Right. For
who
sure.
all know what they're doing. You've got your plumber and your electrician and your HVAC guy.
Right.
Like those are to me, those three can't get along because they're all trying to shove literally the same pipes through the same holes. Right? I mean,
true.
Quite literally. And no matter what architect drew, and the architect, and you've got, and generally all of them are men, and the engineer, and they've all designed something that doesn't work. They've all designed a plenum to go through where the plumbing line goes, where the electrical line goes. And they have to be a certain distance apart, but they all have to go through the same place.
Right.
And none of them are going to admit that the other one is wrong and put it in the wrong place.
Right.
And that alpha male energy, on one level, there's a know-how, bravado, confidence,
right,
which is important when you're building something because nobody actually knows.
Right.
On the other hand, nobody's willing to back down and collaborate. If you're going to have a successful project, you need that collaboration. I think the male energy is often a much more independent energy,
right,
or a chest-beating energy.
right.
The feminine energy is a much more collaborative energy. And I think like on a construction site, you have this mix of you need that collaboration between all these alpha guys with their big trucks,
right,
who none of us really back down,
right,
but also all of them need the other one because a house built by an electrician won't work,
right,
and a house built by a plumber won't work, and so that would be sort of an alpha side.
Right.
On the other side, you have, look at a sales office. They're often much more female driven. The more successful ones are. Oftentimes you have these lone wolf sales. But when you have a collaborative sales team like Andrea has built here,
right,
everybody's working together, leads come around, you find the right fit, you find the right connection, you find the right person, you have sales meetings where everybody shares and sells and connects.
Right.
And to me, that's a very feminine energy of this sort of connecting space. And there's also can be the other side of that. There can be questioning, there can be uncertainty, there can be judgment, there can be a lot of things that come with that. I feel like being able to merge those two really gets you to a more productive place where you can get that sort of power that comes from, I'm going to run that wire through here and I know what a 20 amp breaker is, even though I have no idea what's in it, but I'm going to do this and I'm going to put it this and this. And you also have that collaborative process of, well, maybe we should run that wire this way, and maybe we should have had 3 conversations before so I can run my wire the way I want to.
I like it. I like where
does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And in fact, because I when you're talking like that, I hear my wife, like the way she talks, it's like guys talk very linear, right? We always talk like, hey, this is the point A to point B, and this is how we're getting there. And women want to more know what the process is and how are we going to do this. And so I understand what you're saying.
And to an extent, I mean, this is a little overly typical because obviously there's 100 ways of being a woman, there's 100 ways of being a man.
Right.
And so I sort of talk it more about masculine and feminine,
right,
as more general descriptors.
Right.
Right. And often there are lots of men who are more feminine in their bearing. There are lots of women who are more masculine and everything in between. And I think we're starting to break down and take away those roles, which is why the pronouns are coming in.
Yeah. So what is with the pronouns? I don't even understand it. I've never even Googled it. I figured you're the best person to ask.
I think personally, we're in an interesting moment. I think we went through a very gendered period in the United States.
Right.
I think dating from sort of the 50s on or so forth, where you've got women are in heels, men are in suits. And this is a way that we've ordered our world.
Right.
But it doesn't really work because men come a lot of ways and women come a lot of ways.
Right.
And all of us come a lot of ways. And so I think we're just coming up with better language to figure out what we're doing. And I don't think that the pronouns are going to be around for a long time. I think it's starting of a discussion.
I think it's a trend. Yeah.
I think it's more than a trend. I think it's a cultural shift.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think there was a time when we had, because there was a time before that. You go, Little House on the Prairie, you're not quite in the same gendered way. Sure. And now we're in a place where we're changing conversations where you can be who you want to be.
Right. Okay.
And you can identify how you want to identify.
But can you really? Let's take that a step further, because for those of you guys who are listening right now, Dawn is a very, very, very successful real estate developer. In fact, funny enough, after we're done with this conversation, we're going to be having a conversation about a building because Dawn is an excellent syndicator, an excellent capital raiser. And let's take a little bit down the real estate journey.
Sure.
So what are some of the projects that you've done here in Kansas City?
We'll talk about the one we're a few blocks from.
Okay.
That's the one that I
Wonder Bread?
The Wonder Bread.
Yes.
And that was a great success and a great failure and everything in between.
Okay.
And that one unfortunately landed me in the deposition chair.
Okay.
But it also made and continues to be a very profitable project and something that really added to the community.
And you got 3 partners in that deal?
No, one.
One.
Well, I mean, there's so many.
One main partner.
Yeah, of substance. Yeah.
And that's
The architect.
the architect.
Caleb Bueland.
Caleb. Super.
Caleb Bueland.
Caleb
Yeah, Bueland.
Bueland. I've met him before.
He's a rock solid architect.
Rock solid. I toured that building actually with Bob Mayer. Saw that you guys actually have the Wonder Bread truck on the top of the building.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It was like some bread truck that we did up, but yeah.
Okay. Well, it looked like it
looks like a Wonder Bread truck. That almost blew up the deal. I tried to blow up the deal over a Wonder Bread truck. We were buying the property, and there was one of the old Wonder Bread delivery trucks was parked in it, and I said, "I'm not closing unless you leave it there." And they said, "Well, we already promised themselves, so I'm not closing." And they said, "Well," so I closed. But, you know,
So how much?
that was an alpha moment of showing off.
So that was Elon, not Don, that moment.
And actually that was part of the genesis of feeling comfortable that Dawn could live in the world. And that so the Wonder Bread project, it's a historic building on Troost, 150,000 square foot, give or take, built over
150,000 square feet.
something like that.
It's an apartment building, correct?
It's an apartment building, multifamily, mixed use. So
Okay.
It's 87 apartments, I think, and about 40,000 feet of commercial.
And what did you guys pay for it?
Not much.
So is not much a number? Or can you get more specific?
No.
Okay.
But we
I had to ask.
bought it well. We bought it well. We put a lot of money into the rehab of it.
Well, I know the rehab was tremendous. That's why I figured you got it
And I think one thing that was beautiful and challenging and horrible about it was that Troost is the historic race dividing line.
Right.
After this meeting, I'm actually going to be sitting down with Chris Good, who's working on renaming. He wants to rename Troost.
Really?
Which is an interesting concept all of its own.
Yeah, that is.
Something that I love in real estate. I think there's a lot of different things that I've added, but I think one thing that has helped me along the way is identifying rising tides of neighborhoods of areas.
Right.
And so when I have had projects, some are better, some are worse, but consistently I've been ahead of the trend in different communities.
Like in Kansas City would be
In
an
Kansas
example
City,
of
I've
that.
been very much ahead of the trend. And I think one thing that feels nice about that is that not being racist has been my one value add. Right. And that's not a hard thing to be, but it is also a very hard thing to be. And so the true story is very challenging, but at the same time, it's also very hopeful that we can be better than we once were.
Yeah, I think that, we all have to evolve as human beings and try to be better and try to help out more. But, you're a product of your environment, as you know, and sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. And we create the environment. And so that's where Troost was really cool. So the Wonder Bread building we envisioned as a mixed use project where we had a bunch of multifamily, but at the same time, that neighborhood didn't exist in a meaningful way. And by saying it didn't exist, obviously there are people there. I think about space a lot and creating spaces. And I wanted to call it a third space, a place that's not where you work, not where you live, but a place where you meet people,
right,
and have fun. And so in that building, we created a coffee shop, pizza shop, and some other common areas that I think have been part of creating this community. And we were also able to locate Chris Good. We bought the property across the street, and we're able to put a little juice shop. Not little, a nice sized juice shop.
Is that Ruby?
Ruby Jeans.
That's yours?
I sold it to Chris, but yeah, it was mine.
Okay. And they're actually, for those of you guys who are listening right now, they're actually in Whole Foods.
Chris has got, I don't know how many, half a dozen locations maybe.
Oh, wow.
I was his kind of a second location. He was located in Westport. And then he needed to move from his Westport location. He had some sewer line issues and other things. So he moved from his Westport location over to us as part of his growth process.
What brought you out to Kansas City?
Tax savings and cheapness.
Same here.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a combination of the niche of historic tax credit redevelopment, which is a niche that I understand.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because
Sure.
A lot of people don't understand tax credits because they don't have them in their market. Like if you're in Vegas, you're not dealing with historic tax credits. If you're in California, you're not dealing with historic tax credits. If you're in Seattle, you're not dealing with historic tax credits.
Not much.
Yeah. Well,
The
they don't
buildings
offer them.
weren't there.
The market doesn't require it. They might have it, but the market doesn't require it because the demand is so high. Where in Kansas City, there's a lot more of that development. Everything is historical.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in terms of the podcast and listeners and such, tax policy drives a lot of development.
Right.
And so taxes are going to decide where the next neighborhood's going to be. How we allocate our tax dollars is going to decide where the next project's going to be. And we're moving around so much money in so many different ways with all these different Build Back Better Acts and other things that policy says what the next hot neighborhood is much more than the next cool restaurant.
Right.
So, we're too young for it, but, when they built the interstates, then there was suburban development. There was a decision to build highways, and so somebody else did all the horizontal, all the groundwork, so you could just come in and build.
Right.
And so that era's over.
That was the New Deal.
That was the Highway Act, like the 1950s.
Yeah.
And so now we're in a very different time. So now we've got $1 trillion that was getting thrown around, and it's getting thrown around in all sorts of different ways. And now I kind of call it the iPodization because there's so many little niches of where those tax abatements are going and where those advantages are. I'd like to think I'm really smart. I don't know that I'm all that smart, but I do think that little bit of delta can make a lot of savings. And so something Kansas City used to do really well was allow for property tax abatements. Right. And that makes a huge difference on these projects.
So property tax abatements would be where you petition the city to hold or entirely...
You hold the property tax at its current number for a period of time.
Or lower, or does it ever... I've never had one.
No, it's at the number at the time of abatement.
Got it. So you're going to go to the...
Sometimes you might do a tax protest that the taxes were too high, but you're saying whatever the appropriate taxes were at that period would be held for a period of time.
Right, and that could be...
And so it doesn't cost the city necessarily per se. They just don't get the chance to get more money.
Right.
If that makes some sense.
Yeah, they don't get it.
A lot of people say the city's subsidizing it. It's not exactly subsidizing. It's simply foregoing the opportunity to increase a property tax that they would have otherwise had. And in exchange for that, they are getting all sorts of other revenue.
Right. So like sales tax and jobs and all sorts of things. So that was your...
Fees and things. And there's a lot of... The Wonder Building is a beautiful example, which is why I want to bring that up. We bought it. There was one fellow that worked about 2-3 days a week moving equipment around. Right. Roy, when we bought it, in the 150,000 feet.
Right.
Roy, nice guy, big old mutton chops, working 3 days a week, part-time, probably making, it was a few years ago, making $13 an hour.
Right.
Now, in that building, we have 40,000 feet of commercial, doctors. Ride KC just did $500 million, so we have city officials, we have attorneys, and we have chefs, and we have cooks. So we probably have 100 people working in that building every day.
Right.
Making God knows how much.
Right.
Millions is going through there. We have 87 people living there. We have cars. We have, furniture that gets moved. You have so much economic activity and vitality is coming out of that space.
Right.
Where it was Roy.
Right.
And Roy's a nice guy, and
that's fine, but that's not going to bring in the tax dollars.
Roy, and we actually ended up keeping Roy on. Roy actually worked on the job site for us, and he went from working 3 days to working 5 days, pushing a broom for us, and I think Roy's retired now. But in any event, I mean, that's it. There's a lot of the bigger you can grow the pie, the better off we all are.
What do you think your best skill set in real estate development is? Because when we were talking the other day, you just gave me it straight like you need to hear it. And I appreciate that. A lot of people would not. I'm in contract to buy a property on 1044 Main Street, and I was talking to Dawn, and you go, you sound like you're all over the place. The bank's not going to like that. You need to get a better plan of action, because I'm used to having multiple exit strategies. That's how I was talking about things to you. And you're like, no, you need to present things the way that the bank needs to see them. And I was talking to Denver earlier when we were shooting a little video down there, and I was like, I just don't know how to talk to bankers. And I think that's one of the things you're really good at.
I appreciate that.
So can you break down like how that is and how you do it? And how, it's a lot of structuring the deal, right?
I think it's a lot of, and it may go back to our initial discussion, and unfortunately just how I'm made, which is hard in its own way, but it's empathizing with the person that you're talking to about what they need to hear. Because the message you're going to tell the bank is not the same message you're going to tell the drywaller, is not the same message you're going to tell your investor, is not the same message you're going to tell your kid. If you want to tell your kid, I'm going to buy 1044 Main,
right,
and it's a 5 cap, they're going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, Dad.
Right.
You're going to say, there's that cool building near where we went and saw Lady Gaga. They're going to say, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, right.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love Lady Gaga. Oh, we could park there, right, Dad?
Right.
Yeah, we could park there if I buy the building. Right. So that's how you explain it to your kid. You explain it to the drywaller. You say, we're delivering this in 6 weeks, and we're going to need you to get in here, and we know that you're going to have 3 periods to dry, so I need you to come in these days, and you get it done by X, and you're going to get paid, otherwise we're all in trouble. And then you present it to your investor, and you say, I'm going to get this kind of return, and here's 4 exits. And so you have to be able to hear what they need to hear. And I think something about me is I wear a lot of hats, and literally and figuratively. And so I think
literally and figuratively, for sure.
And I think it helps me to understand what the banker's sitting at, what their needs are, and to empathize with what they're trying to get. Because the banker needs it in a box.
Right. It needs
and the hard thing about you, and I know you're very creative, and I think anybody in real estate has to be very creative. You get very creative about what you're doing, but then you have to put it into a box that is digestible, simple, and you get all complicated about treasuries, and people love to say all these big complicated words, and there's like 2 metrics that a bank's going to care about when it's all said and done.
Cash flow, and what else?
I shouldn't even say 2. There's 1, debt coverage ratio.
Yeah.
No, it's skin. It's going to be debt coverage ratio and LTV or LTC.
Right. How much money you got down, and then what your debt coverage ratio is. But obviously, like the property that you bought, the Wonder Bread building, what kind of cash flow was that producing when you bought it?
Well, none. But it's pro forma. Actually, that was a killer deal on every level. Never mind. That was a better deal. But you're selling a pro forma.
Right.
You're selling an idea. And
Right.
you need to boil your idea down into the simplest way that it can be presented. And you know how complicated it is. You know that all these assumptions are complicated.
Right.
You are taking all of your ideas of, I'm going to have this revenue stream. I'm going to have a pizza shop and a coffee shop. And I'm also going to rent a rooftop. And I'm also going to have apartments. I'm also going to have Airbnb. And you boil all that down and you distill that into a number. And that number is 1.3.
or higher.
Or higher, right? I mean, that's the end of the day. Like, right. I mean, it's a crazy thing that you have all of these different assumptions that all boil into.
It's so funny.
It gets to be a very like cut and dry, and you do all of these things so that you can explain that 1.3 is what it is.
So for those of you guys who don't know what a debt coverage ratio is, Don, would you grace them with your definition? I was just ranting. I had just had a bunch of issues with my properties, and I was in a really foul mood earlier. And so Denver and I rolled over to 1044 Main Street. I was like, gosh darn it. You know what? It's all about this damn debt coverage ratio. And if I just knew how to structure the thing the damn right way that they want to see it, I wouldn't have to have these conversations. Like, I just feel like, you know what? And it's a feeling, right? Like we just talked about feelings. My feeling is because I've done all of these great renovations and because I've never defaulted on loans, that you should just loan me the damn money and I shouldn't have to present my case. But that's not the case.
It does not work like that. I get it, and it's still and you have to figure out how to solve. And what's funny about it, and I think we were talking about these different gender. I'm going back to that male and female. There's the one level that it's very like cut and dry, 1.3. That is, so back up. And another level, it doesn't mean a damn thing. Right. Because it's as cut and dry to a banker, but they know that what gets you to that number is so many feelings, so many assumptions, and then it boils down. So what the 1.3 number is it's very simply the cash flow of the property. However you make the money,
right?
Which is your gross income, whatever it is, less your expenses. 1,000 ways of making money, 10,000 ways of spending money.
Right.
You take whatever you make, you subtract whatever you spend.
Right.
That gets you a net operating income.
Right. Your net operating income.
That number divided by whatever, and this is a little bit tricky here. It's whatever the debt is if it was amortizing. So the loan to get paid off over a period of time. Right. So you take that number. So let's say you make $1 million on the property.
So you're making $1 million in NOI?
No, $1 million in rents.
Okay, so you're making $1 million.
You get $1 million in rents. You have 10 tenants paying you $1,000 a month, whatever. The numbers come to a simple place.
Right.
You get to $1 million of income from a bunch of different rents.
Right.
Then you pay taxes, you pay insurance, you pay property managers, you pay this, you pay that. This is a bad property. We're spending $900,000 on the property.
Right.
So you have $100,000 of income left.
We got $100,000.
We're going to spend $880,000 on $870,000 on property. I'm trying to get. You spend $870. So this property is terrible. You shouldn't be spending 87% of your.
Yeah, not a good one.
But anyway, for some reason you did.
It's got potential.
Somehow it does. You have $130,000 left over.
Right.
Now you've got to cover the note.
Right.
And the loan amortizing is going to be $100,000. And
okay.
I just make that distinction. I think it's going to be really important in the coming period.
Right.
Because we're gonna see with interest rates up that it's gonna be interest only loans.
Right.
And you're gonna see great debt coverage ratio because it's gonna be an interest only debt.
Right.
However, it won't cover your DCR because it won't amortize.
Right. So when you use the amortization schedule, how many years are you using? 25 years? You're not probably
you have to listen. You have to listen to the lender. Some lenders are going to say 25. Some lenders are going to say 30. If you get enough,
it's usually between 20 and 30, and usually
between 20 and 30.
Right.
Yeah, 25 is a good number to use.
Right. So you're taking that number. You're saying, okay.
So and that's the amortization of the debt. So the debt's going to be $100,000 amortized over 25 years. You're making 130. So 130 divided by 100 is 1.3. There's 30,000 of spread. That's what you get to put in your pocket. That's what the bank feels good about. And as long as there's that 30 spread, you can do the next year.
What software do you like to do or do you just use basic spreadsheets?
I just use spreadsheets.
Okay.
I just use spreadsheets. I've been in different places in my career, and I think that's so much. I mean, you need to find the project that fits your person. I am way too hands-on, and so I've learned through the years that I need to do big projects.
Right.
Because I think as hard about a little project as I do about a big one. I need to build a bespoke spreadsheet for every single project. And so I can't do small projects. I once did, and I could do great in them, and I know there's great margins in them, and I think they're really wonderful. It doesn't fit me to do 10 small projects. I'd far rather do one large one. And I don't do good at cookie cutter projects, personally. Right. There are people that do.
You like the challenge.
I guess so.
If you saw the project that Don did on Truce, the Wonder Bread building, which I have had the pleasure of walking, they didn't leave any details. I paid attention to this property very in detail. There's a lot of potential. I mean, it just has everything. It's got a rooftop terrace. They spent a lot of money on this property. There was nothing left untouched. You could tell it had a woman's touch on that property.
I'd like to think that. I think one thing that I think was pretty successful, we were going through the project, and it was one of those first moments when I felt like I needed to bring her to work.
Okay.
And I'm so glad that I did. And it was, you know, I think one difference in the way men and women walk through the world, and I felt it both, is a feeling of safety, what feels safe.
Right.
There's a certain safety that comes. I'm presenting masculine. I'm 6 foot, pretty fit enough human.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get too bothered. But presenting in the world as a woman, a little more concerned.
Right.
And I want to feel what my feeling of safety is. I want to know where my purse is. I want to know where my path is from my car. Truce has a historic perception of risk.
Right.
I don't know that it's real, but it's perceived. And so I pushed. We did a covered parking structure. We took the entire first level that was the manufacturing plant and have 60 covered spots there. And we did that because I was spending time in Kansas City and I was thinking to myself, if I'm in heels, if I'm going to my car, I'm going to rent this building. I'll feel safe going from my apartment to my car in a covered environment.
And you wouldn't be thinking that if you were alone.
I didn't, and I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. But I know that was one of the first times that I can sort of objectively say I let her come to work. And I'm so glad that, and since then I've let her come to work a lot more.
How does that work with your partnerships and stuff like that? Just because it's uncomfortable for other people, but it's probably even more uncomfortable for you in the beginning stages of things, right?
Absolutely.
To do something, to know that you're going to get looks, to know that you're going to get people going.
I think you're your own worst enemy. All of us have secrets. All of us have things that we're ashamed of. While at first it was very concerning to me, I think I learned that I was the only person that it mattered to.
Right.
And over time, it actually became very liberating.
Right.
And not only liberating, but I think it gives other people, because you know what my secret is.
Right.
Right. I walk into the room, you know that I'm letting you know something about me.
Well, it's not so secret.
Right. But you know that I'm letting you know something that's maybe uncomfortable, maybe different.
Right.
Right. And so I think it gives you the permission to share your own.
Right. You disarm people.
Yeah. All of us have that.
Insecurities.
Absolutely. And if you share those insecurities, you can address those insecurities.
Right.
And certainly in real estate, in every deal, you come to the deal and you might say, this is the thing I'm worried about. And if you can let those insecurities out at the front, you're so much better off with the entire project. Everybody's going to be in a better space. Somebody comes to the table, your drywaller comes and says, look, I really want to do this project, but I can't afford materials and I need you to front that. And if they can say that at the front end versus saying, I got this.
Right.
And then you're like, where's the stuff? And then you find out that your drywall's an extra 2 weeks out because they never bought the materials.
Right.
Right. And we both know that. But if you had said at the front, they said, I'm having a hard time right now. And my wife's going through this thing and can you do the, I know usually it's 50% on materials. Can you do 100% on materials on this deal? You say, sure, of course. I got you. And a lot of times I feel like bringing this to the table allows people to say, here's the thing I'm worried about. Here's a way that I don't measure up.
So I have a question, and I want to deflect a little, not deflect, I want to go a little bit deeper into your personal life. And I know that from talking to you on the phone prior many times that you have a family.
I do.
You have children.
I do.
And you have a wife.
I do.
And how does that whole thing play into everything? How was that conversation with your wife? How was the conversation with your children?
Hard.
Yeah.
And not. My wife has known about me and all the me's since before we were married.
Right. Where did you guys meet?
We met at a Jewish singles party.
Jewish singles party. So, as you know, I'm married to a Jewish woman. And
I did know that. That's right.
2 Jewish children.
Right.
So,
there was a
Shabbat Shalom tomorrow.
Shabbat Shalom tomorrow. That's right.
Mañana.
Mañana. Sí, habla español. No, it was called the Matzah Ball. It was a Christmas Eve Jewish singles party. So we met there, and it actually took 5 or 6 years before we started dating from that. We were friendly for a long time.
Okay.
I slowly wore her down.
To
bring it to somewhat of a real estate aspect, there was a property that
it was a long escrow.
Well, not even an escrow, a long negotiation period.
Right.
And I told there's a property I really want to buy here that just came to market. Everyone's been emailing me because they got it on the paper.
Can we talk about it, or is it
sure? Sure. I mean, I've been fighting on this one forever. This one will be an interesting pain. I'm the only buyer. I'm the only one that can buy this property.
Which one is it?
39th and Main.
39th.
So I own most of 39th and Main, and there's one piece I don't have.
Is that the blue building?
No, it's a gorgeous building right at 39th and Main. It's a 2-story historic building called the Hyde Park.
Okay.
It's right on the corner of 39th and Main. It's kind of a deco style, kind of white columns. The Church of Scientology owns that building.
Nice.
No, but they do.
Well, I don't know. I just figured that was an appropriate word to say.
Yeah. So unless you know Tom Cruise, Tom, if you're watching, I want to buy your building.
And Tom, if you're watching, give Don a 5-star review and subscribe to our channel.
Absolutely. Hit like. So Church of Scientology has owned that building for a long time. I've been trying to buy it for a long time. I own the building right next door, and I own sort of half their parking lot.
Okay.
And there's some easements. This goes into the legal side, but there are some prescriptive easements, which means unrecorded easements,
right,
which allow me to access my building across their property. And so they will never be able to develop that property, do anything on property without my allowance.
Without your allowance.
And I own half their parking lot.
In other words, he's got their feet to the fire.
It's hard to have a billion-dollar mega church's feet to the fire.
Right.
So
you got as close as you can get.
I bring this up relative to the dating is that I've gotten friendly, and I think it's all about personalities. I think real estate or any business you're doing, it's about the people. It's not about the numbers or anything else. We talked about 1.3. It's about the people.
Right.
That are why they believe 1.3. So I sat down with Maggie a few times. She's at the church, and I told Maggie, I said, just so you know, I'm buying this property. I met my wife, and I said, this is the woman I'm going to marry, but just not today. And so I said, this was 2016, 2017. I said, I'm going to buy it. It's not a threat, but I will.
Yeah, I'm here.
So you can either sell it to me now, or you can sell it to me in 6 or 7 or 8 years. And so here we are in 2022, and they haven't sold it to me yet, but I know I'm going to buy it.
What are they asking for?
3 times appraised value.
So appraised value would be
1.3, something like that.
I was going to guess that
1.2, 1.3. It's 18,000 feet. There's a little bigger than that, but it's so left out in the rain. It's just a disaster of a building. There's no meaningful roof. There's some tenants that are all month to month. There's been no investment in that building. I mean, we call it landlord for a reason. There's like kind of this lordship, this aristocracy, but it comes with an obligation you have to your community. You own property. You need to be invested in it. You need to take care of it. It's not trading cards that you leave in the base. Leave in grandma's attic and hope they go up in value.
Right.
You need to take care of your land. They haven't.
Right.
And so we're stuck with this deteriorating asset that is a jewel of Kansas City.
Right.
That I am so excited for the opportunity to take care of. They just have to come to something approaching reality.
Right. And Nobody else is gonna buy it.
So I will buy. So and that you're talking about the personal.
So yeah, let's go back to the personal. So like with your wife, and obviously you guys have been married for how many years?
14 or 15. We married in
you
2008.
better get it right.
No, I have it. I think we just had our 15th anniversary. Once you get to higher numbers, it gets lost.
I'm with you.
Yeah, 22 minus, we got married in 2007. So 22 minus 2007, 15.
When you, I don't know if is it come out of the closet? Is that
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, that goes a whole different. But yeah, I mean, there's sexuality and there's gender presentation. There's all sorts of different things. And coming out is, yeah, who knows? It's all sorts of language stuff. This isn't a podcast about that.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious about in terms of like that conversation and like when you're with your family, are you dressing as Don or Elon?
Generally Elon.
Okay.
But sometimes Don.
Sometimes. And what would that sometimes be? If you're
going
it's
to dinner,
usually
it can be just different opportunities, different timings that make sense for whatever reason.
Okay.
It kind of comes and goes, and there's logistics too. I mean, there's some work involved and time involved.
Right, for sure.
So it really comes and goes, and we've found different pathways. The kids are all right. I think that the wonderful story of our future, I feel really good about. If we hand off a decent something, Denver, and folks in his generation will do a great job with it. I think, our parents didn't really hand us a clean ball.
Right.
To work with.
Right.
So we've worked with what we've got. We're about the same age.
Right.
So it wasn't the best handoff of all time.
Right.
And they're also still not handing it off.
Right.
If you look at the coming presidential elections and all the rest, you've got 80-year-olds that are still around, and God bless them, but it's kind of our turn.
Yeah. You may not make it.
Oh, you're 80. I mean, you got Warren Buffett's 92. He's a genius. I love reading Warren Buffett.
Right, for sure.
And I think one thing, it's free ranging, but one thing he's done really well is he has a series of folks under him.
Right.
But he's not ready to shuffle off the stage. But that doesn't leave much air in the room. Anyway, all that said, I feel like the kids are great. They get a world. They have no issue on pronouns. There's never been a question on the kids on pronouns. Kids get it. They don't care. Your pronoun is whatever you ask it to be.
Right.
Right. That's the end of the day. The good one is like Puff Daddy, right? His name is P Diddy or Puff Daddy or Diddy or just P or whatever.
Right. Whatever it is this week.
And you know what you call him? Whatever the hell he damn well asks. Right. That's what you call him. Like, it's that simple. Right. It's not a hard thing. Is your pronoun? If you want your pronoun to be Guga, just tell me and I'll call you Guga. Because that's totally fair.
I'm good with
Troy, whatever, but it's up to you. And if you say this is what I want, then it's just respectful.
Right.
And it's easy to be respectful.
Right.
And it's hard to be respectful. But I mean.
Yeah, sometimes we don't know if we're being disrespectful or respectful.
But you are. You do know.
Right.
You do know. People say they don't know, but they know. Because
I don't know. I'm going to disagree. My wife used to say to know me is to love me, because I didn't realize how much. I thought being transparent was the best way to be. And it's not in business, and in person and in friendships. I would always be like, hey, I'm going to say what's on my mind, but that's not always the best way to make friends and the best way to build relationships and the best way. It
can be abrasive.
Yeah, trust me.
That comes to communication style, and sometimes it's hard to hear.
Right.
And I think that comes to finding ways of communicating in a way that people can hear you.
Right.
And so if you come into the room like a bull in a china shop, I mean, that goes to negotiating a sale. You're cold calling like Church of Scientology.
Right.
I think I burned some bridges early on because I feel they felt like I wasn't respecting their religion.
Right.
Well, they're kind of right, but
what did you do that got them to feel that way?
I think I was kind of a bull in a china shop.
Right.
I think I was like
that was Elon.
Probably. Yeah. I think that might have been part of it. I got really fascinated by them, actually. I actually went and did the personality test down there because I was like, what is this? Like,
right.
Why is everybody drinking the Kool-Aid?
Right.
And I learned a little bit about myself from it, and I don't process the way they kind of expect people to process.
Right.
And they have certain patterns and such, and so I think they thought maybe I was playing jokes with them or something.
Oh, okay. They thought that you're just in there. You're just doing your your due diligence ahead of time.
But I was actually truly fascinated. But I was also like, I think there's something threatening. Like, I'm gonna just buy your thing. I think at the end of the day, it's that was one. As much as you talk about numbers, there's some sellers that are motivated by things other than a number.
Right. A lot of sellers, we talk about that all the time, is like, if you're just talking about money, you're probably not going to get the deal.
If you're talking about money, then you just have to come up with the highest number, and that's not a good business model.
That's not a good business model. 100% agree.
That's really hard. If you're talking about time, if you're talking about delivery, you're talking about those other things, you have a better chance. And so the Scientology, unfortunately, is a space where they simply want, and they've been very clear, they want a 30-day cash closing for the highest number they can think of.
Right.
And so that's just not a viable choice for the product that they are selling.
Right. So they just need to get a reality woken up and see that.
And most sellers have some driving force driving them to sell. The church has no property taxes, which is a problem.
Right.
They should. They have $1 billion of endowment, and they see with streetcar and all the rest that the property value will continue to rise. So
Right.
absent outside pressure, they won't do what they need to do. And the issue is they have easements across their property.
Right.
They can't make sense of it. They are not taking care of their property. And that's a situation where there needs to be public pressure applied, because there's an obligation of landowners to take care of property.
Right.
And we can bitch and moan about the city, and we should.
Right.
Because the city can do a lot better, but without the city, we can't have our jobs. We need the roads done, maintenance, and we need all these city permits.
So what advice would you give to somebody who is listening right now, who is a young person who is trying to get started in real estate? And I guess this is a question I probably should ask you too. Prior to that is, how did you get your start?
I had a great time yesterday. A friend of a friend came up to me, young 23-year-old kid, awesome mullet, and he's been a broker for a year, and he came and said, "Hey, I want to start in real estate." So I actually just got to have that conversation yesterday. We had a drink over the Canary, and that's why I said the kids are okay, because 23-year-old kid going and asking and saying, what should I do? And sitting and talking to him, he's kind of actually sounded like you on Main Street, where he's got 100 ideas. And he's going a mile a minute, and it's like, well, what do you want to do? What are you good at? Where do your passions lie? Andrea is awesome. If Andrea and she did do property management, and she was great at property management, but that's not where she wants to be.
Right.
And so it sucks her time and energy and takes it away. I got my start, got my real estate license, and sold residential properties. I cold called at Watts Realty in downtown Denver.
So
And
as an agent,
I was, I don't know, it was 2000, I think. I think it was 2000. I bought my own house. I had a nice down payment. My dad helped a little bit. Selling pumpkins, actually. It's a whole nother story. But in any event, when I was buying that house, I wanted to do my own, but I had a broker do it. I said, well, this is easy money, good money. I'm a broker. I was doing some winter work, I had some summer work, and I'd cold call, and we had these old lists, phone number lists, and you call, and I hated it. I was terrible. I'd telemarket to these folks, and I could care less about their problems, and I didn't want to figure out their spouse, that they're getting divorced, they're getting married, they want a new house. I just didn't care.
right.
And there are people that care,
Right.
and should. I just didn't.
Right.
And I was not good at it. But I sold a few houses along the way, and I started seeing investment opportunities, and I liked those, and those I could put together, and I was like, oh, we can build this or that. And
Where did that come from? Did your parents invest?
No, my great uncle was a developer.
Okay.
Kind of skipped a generation. My great uncle and my grandma, my mom's dad. There's family folks that have been involved.
Okay.
For a long time. There was kind of a mentor from kind of Sunday school kind of thing, and so I kind of started putting together and a couple deals that were good ground up projects, and I connected with those folks a lot better on, hey, let's do this.
Right.
And so we did a bunch of townhome properties for sale.
Right.
And I was just much better at that.
So you found your zone.
And then along the line, somehow I ended up representing. It was actually it was a fun, weird mistake, because the world does that.
Right.
My dad and I shared an office, and they faxed the wrong person from Greenpoint Mortgage was a
I remember
foreclosure lender. They had a bunch of bad lender.
Yeah, I remember them. I sold for them.
They faxed the wrong person. I got the number, and Jim Giambalvo and he was their REO guy.
Right.
And so I ended up selling.
Lost mid.
I sold all the REOs in Denver for a couple years.
We have the same background.
There you go.
I sold 2,200 REO properties in Las Vegas from 2008 to 2012.
That's more than I sold.
Were you on like the whole Dallas journey, going to the DS News things?
No. I just Greenpoint would call me, say there's these properties for sale, and I said fine, I sold them.
Do you know the interesting thing about that is that most people who are listening right now may not know this, but Denver, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Newport Beach are where all of the companies, or majority of the companies, who sell foreclosures are based out of. I took so many trips to Denver because Fidelity was based out of there. IAS, if you remember that.
I think that was at that time because they had a different. They've changed the way the foreclosure rules work in Colorado, but it used to be that foreclosures were a good process.
Right, but it was
they've changed
Integrated
the process.
Asset Services was out there. There was Fidelity was a huge one out there.
That
I went to all
name's
these conferences.
That name's familiar. For
in
sure.
Denver.
Yeah.
Because my life from 2008 to 2012 was literally going to Dallas, was going to Irvine, was going to Philadelphia, and that's where all of the foreclosure companies were based, and a majority of them was Denver and Dallas.
I didn't know that. Dallas, I saw some.
Fannie Mae was obviously Dallas. Freddie Mac was Dallas.
That's interesting.
GMAC,
Yeah.
if you remember them, was Dallas.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. It's not going to be the same. The foreclosure world in the next few years is going to look a lot different.
Do you think our market's about ready to head towards a major crash?
No.
Really?
No.
Why not?
History doesn't repeat, it rhymes.
What does that mean?
It means that there'll be commonalities between the different moments. We're both too young to know, but the idea of the interest rate spike is, from everything I've read and looked at, is much more in common with the 70s than it would be an inflationary thing. So inflation is a lot different of a beast. What happened in 08 to 12 was a lot of leverage.
Right, over leveraged guys with 5-6 houses.
The leverage doesn't exist right now. Not on a widespread residential standpoint. That leverage exists in larger commercial deals,
right,
where people have prefs and prefs over prefs. A lot of those folks can afford to lose and can extend and pretend. Extend and pretend. That's right. The loan they just say, well, I was supposed to get an 8% pref, and instead I get a -1% pref, and whatever.
You told me I did the Kansas City slide the other day. You got all these acronyms, like get into the deal and figure it out. Is that the Kansas City slide?
The Kansas City slide is when you set a closing and you just pretend like who knows when you're going to close. The Kansas City slide is we're going to close in 30 days or 3 years. It's all the same. And you just pretend it's 30 days, and you're like, we're going to get in, we're going to close in 30 days. And then you do the Kansas City, like a week before closing, you haven't heard a word. It's a day before closing. Oh, well, I got to move this a week. I'm like, okay, fine. And then a week passes. We're going to move it another week. Okay, fine. And there's, at least my experience, it's unique to this market that everyone lets you get away with it.
Right. It is very unique. It seems like it's the Midwest niceness, not the Kansas City slide. It seems like people out here.
I think it's that we're just not there just isn't that buyer right behind you.
Right.
I think as the market slows, you'll see that in other places.
Right.
Kansas City, for better or worse, hasn't spiked, and I don't think it will.
So you're active in Denver, and you're active with all sorts of real estate development. How many properties do you own? Or have under management and partnerships and developments?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure.
Not
so that's
100%.
That's a good number.
Yeah. If you talk about family and Judaism, we were having children. I didn't know whether the children have penises or not, so I didn't know if I needed to do a circumcision. But I went and interviewed. There's a Moel that comes and does the circumcision.
Yeah, it was at my son's.
Yeah. And so I went to interview a couple before.
Right.
And I went and saw this one fellow and wanted to go through and see
Did you bury yours in the backyard too?
No. But I asked him, and I remember asking him, I said, how many circumcisions have you done? He said, well, about 5. I'm like, that's not a good answer. You can't say about 5. If you've done circumcisions and it's a single-digit number, you need to know exactly how many circumcisions you have done, right? Like, you want a person who is, if you've done 1,000, I get it.
Yeah.
So maybe 20 properties of some kind.
But they're all major ones.
Everywhere from, I have a couple small ones, but most properties are 30 to 100 units in residential, or on the commercial side, 20,000 feet and up.
Right.
Or then there's a couple of some land holds that are, 15,000 foot land holds or something like that. Cool. So there's always somebody bigger and there's always somebody smaller.
Right.
I try to keep deal sizes, 5 million to 15 kind of deal size.
Right.
5 to 10 is nice. I have like one project now that's sucking me. That's it's a wonderful. There was a biscuit shop that's going to be exciting. It's like 800,000. It's just too small, but it's a great project.
Right.
But that's kind of the
You're invested in St. Joe, Missouri as well, right?
I have one property. Thank you, Troy, for the best property manager.
I don't even remember who I recommended. Who was it?
That was a wonderful story. That's why I say it's all about the people. Nancy Lee.
Okay. I might have to call her back.
She's dead.
Well, I guess I won't be calling her anytime soon.
But she lives an amazing legacy. I appreciate that you introduced me to her when you did.
Yes.
Because she was still with us. And she hopped right to. We did property tour, and she knew that she was sick, but she didn't kind of share that. She had breast cancer. She had set up her property managers, Aaron Shackelford and Amanda Holcomb, who took over, who had been running her business. And what I respect on so many levels is that she set up such a wonderful structure.
Right.
That without a beat, and she wanted it. Her own legacy is this property management, and she actually saw my property as something that was a way to stabilize her group, and so it was pretty neat.
That's a pretty big property down there too, isn't it?
It's 40 units. I mean, it's a good size. For St. Joe, I say I have the nicest property in St. Joe. St. Joe is fun to make fun of.
It is for sure.
Yeah, but they've stabilized it. You need property management in St. Joe, Missouri. Aaron and Amanda are absolutely phenomenal.
Do you have social media? How do people who are interested in your story continue to follow you?
They talk to you. Yeah, they call you.
Okay. Follow me if you guys want to hear about Don's story.
Yeah, I do have some social, but it's not. I don't do much real estate in there. I think when I grow up, I really want to write and share in that way.
Cool. Any final words that you want to leave our listening audience with? Any words of encouragement?
I think bringing your whole self to work.
Okay.
Bring all the things that you have. Bring all your baggage. Everyone you know is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And when you show up into the deal, bringing, everything, everyone's better off for it. Bring your bad idea. Bring your shame. Work through it. Process it. Be honest with it. But that will get you to a place where you can say, here's how we did it right. Here's how we did it thoughtfully.
Right.
And built something that you can be proud of, because real estate will last decades.
Has real estate changed your life?
I mean, everything has. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like in terms of as becoming from an agent to somebody who probably doesn't have to work unless they wanted to.
That's a good question. I'll process on that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Make sure you guys give us a 5-star review. For people who are struggling with identity crisis, what would you say to them?
The same. Bring your whole self. There's nothing. Yeah, everyone you know is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And so if you're somebody that has different gender questions, if you're somebody that, who knows? I mean, there's so many different traumas that you have in your life. The person across the table from you has plenty that they're worried about too.
Right. You
break into that and you say, hey, we're both here to solve something, and you'll do great.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. If everybody would be so kind as to give us a 5-star review, share this video with a friend, and Dawn will grace us with her presence again.
I look forward to it.
Thanks so much. We'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.